Level B2, 8:30 at night. I had my keys in my hand when I heard the second set of footsteps. Then a third. I stopped walking. The parking level was empty except for 3 vehicles, mine and 2 others I recognized immediately. The yellow lights cast long shadows between the concrete columns, and for a moment nobody moved. Then Tanner Webb stepped out from the left, VP of Operations, 6'2", former college athlete who still carried himself like one. His breath fogged in the cold air. A second later, Miles Hartley appeared from my right. CFO, glasses, the kind of careful eyes that were always calculating distance. They had me boxed in before I reached my door. "Working late again, Reed." Tanner said it. The way he said everything smooth, like he was doing you a favor. I kept my keys in my hand. "What do you want?" Miles adjusted his glasses. "We know what you've been doing. Asking questions outside your scope," Tanner continued. "Pulling files that don't belong to you. Meeting with people who no longer work here." I looked at both of them and said nothing. "It's simple," Miles said. "Resign tomorrow morning. We have a separation package ready. Clean exit, solid reference, everyone moves forward. And if I don't," Tanner's smile shifted. Not the one he used at charity dinners with the board. Something harder underneath it. "There are performance reviews with your name on them, documented concerns, behavioral flags, all properly dated and signed. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make your next employer think twice." Miles stepped closer. "There are also some accounting irregularities in the system. Your access code shows up during those changes." Interesting timing. I felt the cold settle into my chest. This wasn't improvised. They had been building this for months. "Your father just had heart surgery," Tanner added. "Owen starts his second semester next month." "Be smart about this," my son's name, out of his mouth. I didn't feel anger. Exactly. Something quieter than that. And much colder, I looked at both of them and smiled. "There's a third option you haven't considered." Tanner's smirk didn't move. "There's no third option. Resignation letter on Shaw's desk by 9 a.m. Otherwise, we begin the termination process." They walked away without waiting for a response. Expensive shoes on concrete. The echo faded, and then I was alone. I sat in my truck for a few minutes with the engine off, not panicking, just thinking through the sequence one more time, making sure every piece was in place. Everything was in place. My name is Reed Calloway. I'm 49. I've spent 23 years in industrial operations, the last 4 at Hartwell Industrial Group in Columbus, Ohio. I'm not a complicated person. I drive a 2019 pickup. I own a house I bought when my son Owen was in elementary school. My father Earl, 74, lives 20 minutes away, still stubborn enough to argue with his doctors. I say all that so you understand. I'm not someone who looks for trouble, but I've worked long enough to know when trouble has already decided to find you. I joined Hartwell as senior operations manager. Good salary, real responsibility, the kind of work I was trained for. Within 6 months, I understood who actually ran the place. CEO Weston Shaw was 63 and focused on his legacy, not his daily operations. He was a decent man, but checked out. That gap got filled by Tanner Webb and Miles Hartley, and they filled it completely. Tanner had been at the company 14 years. He knew every board member by name, knew their kids, knew which charity events to attend and which to skip. People trusted him immediately. I watched it happen in real time. He'd walk into a room, make eye contact with the right people, say the right things, and within 20 minutes, everyone in the room assumed he was the most reasonable person there. I saw him do it to a facilities director named Walt Greer during my first year. Walt had raised legitimate concerns about contractor safety protocols on a renovation project. Tanner spent one afternoon with him, agreed with everything Walt said, suggested a collaborative review process, and 3 weeks later Walt was gone. Reassigned to a satellite office 2 states away, he resigned within a month. The safety protocols never changed. Miles was Tanner's counterpart, MBA from Wharton. He designed the metrics that made their projects look successful regardless of what was actually happening on the floor. If the numbers told one story and the equipment told another, Miles built a model that explained the gap away. The board saw his presentations and nodded. Nobody dug deeper because the slides were clean and the logic sounded airtight. Together they controlled what information reached Shaw and the board. In my first 18 months, 5 team leaders were pushed out. Each one had questioned something. None of them had documented it well enough. I watched each one leave and kept my mouth shut and kept my eyes open. Then Project Streamline launched. Shaw announced it as an operational efficiency initiative. Revenue had dropped 3 consecutive quarters. The stock price was sliding. The board wanted decisive action. Tanner and Miles were put in charge with broad authority. They needed a senior operations manager to handle implementation and run the numbers. Someone with credibility on the floor. They chose me. I accepted with the right amount of gratitude. I understood exactly what I was. 4 weeks into Project Streamline, I understood the full picture. Their plan was straightforward: defer maintenance on 11 pieces of heavy equipment across the main production floor, replace experienced floor supervisors with cheaper contract workers who wouldn't ask questions, falsify inspection certifications to keep regulators satisfied on paper, collect large bonuses tied to the cost savings numbers, then move on to new positions before anything broke down. I would be the one whose signature was on the decisions. 52 workers operated that equipment every shift. I raised concerns in every meeting. Miles talked over me or reframed my numbers. Tanner nodded like he was taking it seriously and then moved to the next agenda item. When I went back later and read the official meeting minutes, my objections weren't there. My alternative proposals had been removed entirely. The record showed unanimous agreement on decisions I had explicitly pushed back against. Then I pulled the maintenance logs, altered, inspection reports with backdated signatures, certification documents tied to equipment that hadn't been physically touched in months. One compressor unit had a past inspection dated 6 weeks earlier. I knew for a fact it hadn't been serviced because the technician scheduled for that job had been reassigned to a different facility the day before. I had the reassignment order in my own inbox. I mentioned the discrepancy to Miles in the hallway one afternoon. He looked at me the way you look at someone who just said something embarrassing at a dinner party. You're overthinking the process, Reed. These systems are more complex than they appear from your position. Trust the workflow. That evening I made a decision. I would keep showing up. I would keep doing my job without giving them any reason to move against me early. And I would build a case that couldn't be argued away, because I had seen enough to know that when they were ready to use me, the move would come fast and I would need everything in order before it happened. The first person I went to was Ray Dempsey. Ray had been lead maintenance technician at Hartwell for 20 years. Quiet man, late 50s, the kind of worker who shows up early and leaves late and never asks for recognition. We had worked alongside each other on a floor upgrade project during my first year. I trusted his judgment. I found him in the equipment bay one evening after most of the day's shift had gone home. I didn't open with the big picture. I asked him directly about one unit, a specific press on line 4, whether it had received its scheduled service in March. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "No, and I've got the original work orders to prove it." Ray had been keeping records on his own for 4 months. Every instruction he received to skip an inspection or sign off on work that wasn't completed. Every date, every name. He had photographs of the unsigned maintenance cards filed alongside inspection reports that showed the work as done. He had been waiting for someone with enough standing to do something about it. He gave me copies of everything that night. The second person was Hector Vega, night security supervisor. Hector and I had worked together on a facility access overhaul 2 years earlier. He was methodical about his logs, the kind of person who noted timestamps on things most people would ignore. His record showed a pattern of after-hours access to the document management system during the months when the maintenance histories were being altered. The access credentials didn't belong to anyone on the operations team. They traced back to Miles's administrative login. I also noticed something in early November that I filed away carefully. There was a new face in the Project Streamline status meetings, a young guy named Colby Webb who had joined the sales department 3 months earlier. He sat near the back, took notes, and rarely spoke. It took me 2 weeks to place the resemblance. Same jaw, same way of holding his shoulders. Tanner's son. I watched him across the table during one meeting where Tanner was presenting the revised maintenance deferral schedule. Colby kept his eyes on his notepad the entire time Tanner was talking. He didn't look up once. That was the kind of thing you notice when you've spent years watching people in rooms. I started recording every Project Streamline meeting in October. Ohio is a one-party consent state. I used a small device in my jacket pocket. I ran it for 6 months and never said a word about it to anyone. In early December, I made a phone call I had been thinking about for weeks. I called the OSHA field office in Columbus and asked to speak with someone in the formal complaint division. I gave my name. I identified myself as a current employee with documented evidence of falsified safety inspections and deferred critical maintenance on heavy industrial equipment. The investigator I was connected to was named Nora Whitfield. She asked me specific questions. Equipment types, unit identifiers, documentation formats, the names of personnel who had signed off on the falsified records. I answered all of them. She told me she would open a preliminary inquiry and requested that I send supporting documentation through a secure submission portal within 72 hours. I sent it the same night, 47 pages, maintenance records, reassignment orders, time-stamped photographs Ray had taken, the access log excerpts from Hector. 3 weeks later, Nora called back. The preliminary inquiry had been upgraded to a formal investigation. She asked when would be a reasonable time to have an investigator present on site. I told her I would let her know. That night in the parking garage, that was me letting her know. One more thing happened before the parking garage that I need to tell you about. 10 days before they cornered me at my truck, Colby Webb knocked on my office door at 5:15 in the afternoon. Most of the floor had already cleared out. He closed the door behind him without being asked. He stood there for a moment like he was deciding whether to go through with it. Then he said, "I know what my father is doing. I think you do too." I didn't confirm or deny anything. I just asked him to sit down. He told me he had been putting pieces together for weeks. Phone calls he overheard at home during the holidays. A conversation between Tanner and Miles in Tanner's office that Colby had walked in on by accident, where they had been discussing Reed's exposure window in relation to the bonus payout schedule. He didn't fully understand the terminology, but he understood the tone. He pulled out his phone and played me a 40-second audio clip he had recorded himself 2 days earlier. Tanner's voice, talking to someone I didn't recognize, saying that the safety concerns were Reed's problem to manage on paper, not ours to carry. I listened to it twice. Colby was 24 years old and sitting in my office looking like he hadn't slept properly in a week. He said he didn't know who else to bring it to. He said he wasn't doing it to hurt his father. He said he just couldn't let it keep going. I told him he did the right thing. I told him to go home, say nothing to anyone, and trust that it would be handled. I copied the audio file before he left. I also made sure right then that whatever happened next would not touch Colby. He had walked through a door most people wouldn't have the nerve to open. That deserved protection, not consequences. The morning after the parking garage, I was in the building by 5:50 a.m. I signed in manually at the main entrance with Hector rather than using my key card. He logged the time in his physical register without being asked. Small detail. It would matter later. Cora Finley had worked as executive administrative director at Hartwell for 22 years. She had seen 4 different leadership regimes come and go. She had watched Miles publicly dismantle a junior analyst named Pete Sorrell over a spreadsheet error in front of a full department meeting until Pete handed in his badge 2 weeks later. Cora had never forgotten it. She made sure the main conference room was unscheduled and unlocked for the 6:30 slot I needed. I placed a single folder at each seat around the table. Nothing inside but my business card. Then I sent individual messages to CEO Weston Shaw, Renee Stafford from Legal and Compliance, Preston Cole from Corporate Security, and 3 board members, Elliot Nash, Paige Hollis, and Ivy Callahan. The message to each of them said the same thing. Immediate operational and legal risk. Conference room, 7 a.m. I will explain in person. Shaw arrived first at 60:58, with the expression of a man who had not enjoyed his morning coffee. The board members came in within the next 10 minutes. Renee and Preston arrived together at 7:08. Everyone looked at the folders, looked at each other, and sat down. At 70:22, I connected my laptop to the projector and started talking. I walked them through 6 months of Project Streamline. Every maintenance deferral decision, every inspection certification tied to equipment that had not been serviced, every altered document. I showed the original work orders that had been denied. I showed the technician reassignment records. I showed Hector's access logs with the after-hours entries traced to Miles's credentials. "These are serious allegations," Renee said. "What's the documentation basis?" I handed each person a sealed envelope, full meeting notes from every Project Streamline session, the real versions, time-stamped with my objections intact. The contrast with the official minutes that Miles had filed was visible on the first page. Tanner arrived at 70:28. He scanned the room, clocked the situation in about 3 seconds, and produced his golf course smile like he had been expecting a welcome party. Well, unusual start to a Wednesday. Miles came in 90 seconds later. He was sweating. Tanner moved quickly once he understood the shape of what was happening. He leaned forward and addressed the board directly. "I want to be transparent. We identified potential compliance gaps approximately 3 weeks ago and began a quiet internal review to address them before the inspection. What Reed has assembled here is a misreading of a process that was already underway. We didn't announce it broadly because we didn't want to cause unnecessary alarm." Miles reached into his briefcase and produced a report. Clean cover page, professional formatting, dated 3 weeks earlier. An internal safety review signed by both of them. Several board members leaned in to look at it. I could see the doubt forming. Tanner had done this before. He knew exactly how much a well-formatted document could shift a room. "May I see that?" I asked. Miles slid it across without hesitation. Confident. I looked at the cover page, then looked up at the projector screen, then looked at Tanner. "Can you pull up the file properties on this document right now on that screen so everyone can see?" The room went quiet. Tanner didn't move. Miles didn't move. Renee was already opening her laptop. Renee read the system log entry out loud. File created 10:17 p.m. Last modified 10:44 p.m. She paused. That would be last night. The room shifted, not dramatically, just a degree or two, the way a room does when something that seemed uncertain becomes clear. Elliot Nash set the report down on the table and pushed it slightly away from him. Paige Hollis looked at Miles. Ivy Callahan looked at Shaw. Tanner recovered faster than Miles. That was always his strength. The creation date reflects when I compiled the final formatted version. The underlying data and analysis was built over weeks. Any competent review of the content itself will confirm that. Then the content should match your calendar records, Renee said. Meeting notes, email threads, draft versions, all of that would exist in the system if the work was done over time. Of course it does, Tanner said. We're happy to provide all of it. Miles said nothing. His hands were flat on the table. Tanner turned to face me directly. His voice stayed even, but the register changed. Harder underneath now. Let me tell you what I think is actually happening here. Ride has been struggling with the scope of this project for months. The pressure got to him. He started reading patterns into normal operational decisions. He's been working unusual hours, pulling files he had no authorization to access, meeting off-site with former employees. We flagged these behaviors internally because we were concerned, and now, rather than accept a graceful transition, he's built a presentation out of misread data and partial records and called an emergency board session to cover his own exposure before the quarterly results come out. He said it well. I'll give him that. A few of the faces in the room went neutral again, which is what Tanner wanted. Shaw looked at me. Reed, that's a significant counterclaim. How do you respond? I had prepared for this moment. I had run through it in my head 100 times during the past 6 months, this exact scenario where they reframed my documentation as paranoia and my preparation as guilt. I knew it was coming. Knowing it was coming was the only reason I could sit still while it was happening. I submitted my resignation this morning, I said, effective 2 weeks from today. I have no interest in their positions, no interest in a promotion, and no financial stake in the outcome of this investigation. I'm here because 52 people operate that equipment on the production floor every shift, and the annual safety inspection is in 4 days. That's the only reason. The word resignation landed differently than anything else I had said. Tanner blinked. Miles looked up from the table for the first time in several minutes. Shaw said, "You're leaving?" "Yes, sir. I accepted a position elsewhere 2 weeks ago. I intended to finish out the notice period quietly. That changed last night. Nobody spoke for a moment. Ivy Callahan was the one who broke the silence. If you're leaving regardless, why take on this kind of risk? If the allegations don't hold up, your professional reputation takes a significant hit on the way out, because it's the right thing to do," I said. I know that sounds simple, but 52 people go home to their families every night and they trust that the equipment they work on has been properly maintained. Tanner and Miles made decisions that put those people at risk so they could hit a cost savings number and collect a bonus. When they leave for their next jobs, those workers are still there. That matters more than how my exit looks. The room stayed quiet. Then the door opened. Nora Whitfield walked in and introduced herself. OSHA senior investigator, Columbus Field Office. She said she had been on site since 6:45 a.m. conducting a preliminary physical assessment of the production floor based on a formal complaint and supporting documentation submitted 3 weeks prior. She had already examined 9 of the 11 flagged equipment units. She had already taken statements from Ray Dempsey and 2 other maintenance technicians. Based on what I've observed this morning, she said, "We are moving from preliminary inquiry to formal investigation effective immediately. I'll need access to all project streamline documentation and I'll need to speak individually with everyone in this room." Tanner stood up. "This is completely out of proportion to what is a straightforward internal matter. These are communication failures, not criminal conduct. Any reasonable review will confirm that." Nora looked at him the way experienced investigators look at people who are still trying to manage the narrative after it's already gone. Patient, unmoved. "You'll have an opportunity to make that case," she said. "I'd recommend having legal counsel present when you do," Miles said. "I want my attorney." It was the first full sentence he had spoken in 20 minutes. Preston Cole, who had been sitting quietly near the door the entire time, stood up and asked both men to remain in the building and to surrender their company devices before leaving the conference room. Tanner started to object. Preston said it wasn't a request. Shaw looked like a man trying to calculate the distance between where he thought he was 6 months ago and where he was standing right now. He turned to Renee and said something quietly. She nodded and started making calls. I sat at the table and let it all move around me. The piece I hadn't told anyone, the last piece of insurance I had kept in reserve, was Colby's audio file. I had it on an encrypted drive in my jacket pocket. If everything else had fallen apart in that room, if the metadata had somehow been explained away, and the board had sided with Tanner's version of events, I had one more card. I never needed to play it. That was fine. It was always meant to be a last resort, not the main event. The main event was already over. I packed my desk that afternoon. One box took about 15 minutes. I have never been someone who accumulates much. Shaw caught me at the elevator on my way out. He looked tired in a way that went past the morning, like a man doing the math on a decade of decisions all at once. "You could have come to me directly," he said. Months ago, I thought about how to answer that honestly. Would you have believed me over them? He didn't say anything. That was the answer. He offered me a role leading the recovery effort, oversee the emergency maintenance program, manage the OSHA response, stay through the transition, and help rebuild what Project Streamline had damaged. I thanked him and said no. I made a commitment to another company. I told him, I intend to honor it. He nodded slowly. I think he respected it, even if he didn't love the answer. I took the elevator down to level B2. Same parking level. Same yellow lights. Same cold concrete smell. The space where Tanner had blocked my door was empty. I stood there for a second before I got into my truck, not for any dramatic reason, just to notice it. Then I drove out. Renee called me 3 weeks later with an update. Tanner had retained outside counsel within hours of the board meeting and had immediately begun providing information about Miles in exchange for cooperation credit. Miles, for his part, had told investigators that every significant decision in Project Streamline had originated with Tanner and that he had only implemented directives from above. Two men who had operated in perfect coordination for years were now working just as efficiently to dismantle each other. Renee called it a circular firing squad. That was exactly right. The formal OSHA investigation ran for several months. Nora's team documented all 11 equipment violations and traced the falsified certifications through the document management system in detail. The financial records showed that the bonus structure tied to Project Streamline's cost savings numbers had been designed specifically to pay out before the annual inspection, a fact that the investigators found particularly relevant. Both Tanner and Miles accepted plea agreements. The charges included falsification of safety records and wire fraud. No prison time, but substantial fines mandated restitution to the company, and a permanent bar from holding safety-critical management positions in any regulated industry. Their names would follow them for the rest of their careers. Hartwell completed emergency maintenance on all 11 flagged units within 10 days of the board meeting, before Nora's formal inspection. The 52 workers on those production lines never knew how close it had gotten. I was fine with that. They didn't need to know. They just needed to go home safe. I made one call before I started my new position. I reached out to Renee and confirmed that Colby Webb's cooperation had been noted as voluntary and unsolicited. He had come forward on his own initiative and had no involvement in his father's decisions. Renee said that was already reflected in the record. Colby kept his job. As far as I know, he's still there. My father, Earl, got a clean bill of health at his 6-month cardiology follow-up. Owen finished his first year of engineering school with a 3.7 GPA. Neither of them knew the full story of what happened at Hartwell until much later. When I finally told Owen, he was quiet for a moment and then said, "You had all of that ready the whole time." I told him I had to. There was no other way to do it. He thought about that. "Weren't you scared?" "Yes." I said, "That's not a reason to stop." I started my new position the following month. Different company, different city, similar work. I was ready for it. Here's what I would tell you if you asked me for the one thing I took out of all of it. When someone with power tries to corner you and hand you a choice between two options they control, your first job is to stay calm enough to see past those two options. They are counting on you to react. They built their whole play around you being rattled and rushed and making decisions out of fear. The moment you panic is the moment they win. Your second job is to have already done the work before the moment arrives. Document everything from the beginning. Build relationships with people at every level, not to use them, but because decent people will stand up for what is right if someone gives them the opportunity. Be patient. Let the evidence speak instead of your anger. I did not beat Tanner and Miles because I was smarter or better connected, or because I got lucky with the timing. I beat them because I had spent 6 months building something they could not argue with, and I stayed quiet long enough for them to believe they had already won. They picked the wrong guy to corner. If any part of this story sounds familiar, if you have ever sat in a parking garage or a conference room or a performance review and felt the walls close in, know this. There is almost always a third option. You may have to build it yourself quietly over time before anyone knows you're building it, but it is there. Stay steady. Do the work, let them defeat themselves.